Media Broadcasting Center.
Welcome to the new JFK show, number 89. Wow, we're rolling up on number 90, and I guess we'll hit 100 pretty soon. All right, everyone knows that's aware in the JFK community that when it comes to new JFK research, no one beats Larry Rivera, and no one beats our team of JFK researchers. We have Dr. Jim Fetzer, Don Fox, myself, and let's not forget Chance George. He's just as much a part of this team as anyone else. All right, so tonight we're going to bring you more information about the ZFilm alteration. So by now, if whoever is disputing ZFilm, well then you've got an op. So it's just time to change the channel and tune in to NBC and the new JFK show where the real truth is. So Larry's really loaded with both barrels, so we're going to let him take over. And hang on to your hats, people. And you might want to have a pencil and paper handy.
Thanks, Gary. Here we go again, once again, with a new JFK show. Tonight, we're going to focus a little bit on the Zapruder film. And Jim Fetzer has published 2 volumes on this, the Great Zapruder Film Hoax, and a couple of chapters in Assassination Science. And tonight we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on the blink rates, the blink rate of the front red lights, which were on each side of the grille of the JFK limousine. And both of these lights had a specific timing. And what we've done here tonight is use other films as a frame of reference, so that we could pinpoint exactly the time frame of the blink, the actual blink of these lights. Okay. Now, in doing the math here of what we're going to talk about tonight, the official version of the frame rate of the Zapruder film is 18.3 frames per second. Okay, and now this works out to the time for each frame to be projected to be 0.0546 seconds. Now that's not very much time. Okay, and that is based on 18.3 frames per second. All right. Now, if this were to be 24 frames per second, it would have been even less time for each frame, which would have brought it down to 0.041. Now, this is the framework that we're laying so that we can establish how many frames are going to be projected for each blink of each red light. And we have a right and a left light on the limo. Okay, now calculating the blink rate cycle, which means from when one red light goes on the left and then it cycles to the right and then it goes back to the left. Okay, now we've used 2 films that show the limo coming down Main Street and turning onto Houston. Okay, the first one is the Hughes film, and the second one is the Marie Muchmore film. Okay, now I have a special program that calculates and where you're able to plot exactly how long each blink consumes as far as time is concerned. Okay, and by using this program, I was able to establish that the cycle, for example, speaking of the left or the right, either one, the left blink light flashes approximately every 1.25 seconds. Now, these are very specific times on both of these, because if you examine, and we're going to show these now momentarily here for our audience, when you examine both of these films, you can see the exact, and this is very exact, the exact timing of the blink rate on both of these, the right and the left light. And this is extremely important because Roy Shaffier, one of the pioneers in this research, published, and this was also published in the 2 books that I just mentioned, a chart of the blink rate, and he used an old Zapruder film What I've used here in revisiting this research has been the John Costello film, which is a lot clearer, and we're able to discern the images a lot better once we enlarge them, and we're going to also show some of these here tonight. Okay, now these blink lights, they flash approximately every 0.35 seconds. Okay, and the duration of the blink is approximately 0.5 seconds, about half a second. Okay, again, the transition from one to the other is about 0.35, about 1/3 of a second, and the duration of the blink is about half a second. Okay, can you go on to the next slide, please? Chance. Lou. Next slide.
Just to make a point about Roy Shaffier's work, Larry.
Yes.
His chart appeared in a chapter co-authored with Mike Pincher in Assassination Science in 1998. Now, all 3 volumes have work on the Zapruder film, but Roy's is only in that book. Then Murder in Dealey Plaza 2000, there's a brilliant chapter by David Mantik on an overview about the film. And then, of course, in 2003, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, which has 6 contributors, but not including Roy Shaffier. So Roy's work actually just appears in the first, in the Assassination Science, 1998.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, and he's provided me with his blink chart, and all I've done is follow his research and try to apply it to the Costello images, which once you see and are able to visualize that these are much clearer images, then it takes on an entire new dimension here as far as I'm concerned. Now, at 0.35 second intervals per blink and 0.53 second duration of the blink, we can calculate the frames per second of the Zapruder film, and more importantly, we can pinpoint where it has been edited by the removal of frames. Okay, now, since each frame should project for, and this was our first calculation here at the beginning, 0.0546, and that's using the 18.3 frames per second parameter that we mentioned. The duration of the blink then should be simple division, 0.53 over the first calculation, then it should come out to about almost 10 frames per second, 9.7 frames per second of the Zapruder film. In other words, each blink should continue on in the film for almost 10 frames. Now, anybody who's seen the Zapruder film, it can tell you right away that you never see a blink there that goes on for 10 frames. But we're going to show the audience here, and we're going to go on a frame-by-frame basis real quickly here.
I just point out, Larry, that while the point you're making is sufficient to show frames have removed, it's not necessary, because they could have excised a whole lot of frames and yet preserved the continuity of the frame rate between the last frame they left and the first frame they continued to use. So it's sufficient, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, the only problem with that is that there would have been quite a visible reaction within the people in the background of of some of these frames. That's why I believe that at the beginning there's some frame removal, but not as much as we see later on. And we'll cover this as we go, because it's
Larry, when they turned from Houston on down, there's actually a huge jump to the.
That's right.
And I estimate at least 100 frames were excised.
Absolutely.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So any sequence of frames, and this goes exactly follows exactly what you just mentioned, Jim. Any sequence of frames where the blink is less would indicate that frames have been removed. Okay.
Yeah, go for it, Larry. I think
now, what about the transition time? Okay, the transition would be the time. Would be the transition of 0.35 plus the duration, which would give 0.88 seconds. This is the amount of time in between, and then the cycle, total cycle, the blink. What I'm talking about here is that the timing where none of the two lights are on, And this would be calculated as about almost 7 frames per second. And we're going to see some of these frames that you're going to see that none of the 2 lights are on. Okay, and it's important because sometimes there's only 2 frames where you don't see any of the 2 lights on. Okay, so that's very interesting. Once I start, you know, working within these parameters, you know, how much time, you know, the blink lasted per frames, etc. You know, then so if we go on to the next slide, Jen,
what you're saying, Larry, is when you apply this criterion to determine the excision of frames, there's been a massive amount of editing that has never been explicitly discussed before.
We're going to look at that right now. Okay, and now this first frame is from the hues, okay, and we can just go on quickly here. As you can see at the bottom, it says...
You have to tell Chance when to advance.
Yeah, you can go on, and what we're doing here is just presenting the left blink light here. And Chance, you can go on to the next one.
Go to 4.
And there's the next, and only almost 1.25 seconds have gone by here. Now go on to the next.
Yeah, go to 5.
Okay, and there again is the left. Now these 3 frames, the difference in timing is only 1.25 seconds. You know, give or take maybe a little bit. But by and large, it's that's the time that it takes for the cycle for the left light to go on and then to the next cycle, about 1.25 seconds. Now go ahead to the next one.
7. Yeah.
Now when we apply this to the much more film, we find almost the exact same relationship. And these are 2 different people that were recording from 2 different positions. Okay, this is the turn from main on to elm, and we have the left light is on. Go ahead, next one. Okay, and here's the next cycle. Okay, and if at the bottom you can see 1.246 seconds have gone by between one and the other. And go on to the next one. And there's another cycle. Okay, so we've had 3 different cycles here on the left blink light, and now we're going to run those 2 films. Okay, we're going to run them a couple of times so our audience can see exactly what we're talking about once they see both the blink lights in action here. Go ahead, Chance. Okay, what we're seeing now is a compilation of both the Hughes and the Much More films. Okay, and it's running a couple of times, and you can see the limo, and you can see blink lights and the rhythm. I think this is very important, the rhythm back and forth and how they are very predictable. Okay, and by plotting these out with a computer program, we can time the exact amount of time that one takes between one and the other, and how long it takes for the one blink light to stay, and then the transition between one and the other. Once we're done, we can go on to the next slide. Okay, and our next slide, Chance, is going to show the time of that left light is going to be on. Okay, at the bottom we have 0.818 seconds. Okay, and then the next
11. The
next slide, yeah. Okay, 1.35. So this came out to about 0.53 seconds, about a little bit, about give or take about half a second is the amount of time that that blink light is running, is on. Okay, now go on to the next. Now we're going to just run some of these frames here, frame by frame, and these are close-ups, actual close-ups of the Costello film. Okay, now starting from Z133, and as Jim mentioned, up to 132. We don't see the limo, and it jumps in right at frame 133, and this is exactly what Jim was just talking about, that possibly up to maybe even 100 frames were extricated, you know, up until this point. And, you know, God knows what happened there Elm Street at the turn of Houston, because as we all know, Zapruder even mentioned and said that he started filming as the limo made the turn from Houston onto Elm Street. I'm sorry, and we don't see that in the Zapruder frame. And
it filmed continuously until it disappeared under the triple underpass.
That's correct. So this first frame shows the blink light on the right. Okay.
I was going to say, Rich De La Rosa was talking about how when the limo made that turn from Houston onto Elm, the driver, the wheels of the limo went up on the sidewalk.
Yeah, on the curb. Yeah. Roy Truly.
Yeah.
He almost got run over by Greer. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he seems to have mistaken the little road that runs right in front of the book depository for Elm Street, and he swung out way too wide, and then they had to recover, and he did a very poor job of it. I think he didn't want the public to see how sloppy the Secret Service was in navigating this turn.
Or
so yeah, they had to yank those frames out.
Or perhaps he was lining it up so that the shot from the Daltex would have been, a straight shot, and avoid the policemen, the motorcycle cops.
There are multiple considerations here. I agree. Go.
Yeah, next frame. This is 134 coming up, and this is blurry here. And some of these, I discovered that some of these frames where it shows obvious removal, the next frame seemed to have been blurred on purpose, okay, here's the frame 134. I think
that's a very important point, Larry, that when they did excision, so you can't get a close comparison and tell what had happened, they blurred the frames deliberately so it would obfuscate what had happened.
That's right. When you start this micro study, you realize that that's a very, very distinct possibility. Okay, now, this, I don't know how you guys see this, but I don't know if it's the right. I'm a little, maybe you guys can give an opinion here. What you see here, if it's the right or the left. They both look the same here to me, but...
Yeah, but Jim DiEugenio doesn't think the film was altered that much, though.
That much. Okay, we can go on to the next one, the 136.
So you saying that it appears that they're both on at the same time?
Well,
no, they're just fuzzy. They're real fuzzy. Yeah, they're real fuzzy too.
Could be caught in transition here. It's also a possibility. Now, go on to the next one, 137. So you can see a big difference here coming up. Okay, now it's obvious that it's the right one that's on. Okay, and if we can go straight on, go right through these. Next one, 138 is to the left. 139 left. 140 left. Go ahead. 141 left. 142 left. 143 left. 144, you jumped, yeah, okay. I just wanted you to stop right there at 146. Now, this seems to be the only...
He's on 147. He's on 147.
Yeah, right, yeah, 146. I want to stop here. This seems to be the only sequence where there seems to have been, it seems to adhere to the 10-frame sequence as per the Hughes and the Muchmore films. It seems to be, of all these Zapruder film, this seems to be the only area, the only sequence of frames that seems to have been untouched, remarkably. So as we can see, we just saw 10 frames in a row, and they're all on the left blink light. I think this is very important because we don't see the same pattern for the rest of the film. Okay, and as we've seen from 137 to 146, they're all on the left side, the left blink light. Okay, now from here on in, you're going to see that they're all over the place, especially after the limo comes from behind the Stemmons freeway sign. And if Chance can run that first MP4 that we had lined up that shows 133 to 182, Chance. We have a special MP4 for that. It's on?
You know, I was going to say, well, Chance is looking for that. It'd be nice to see maybe, you know, maybe in some other week if you can line it up. To me, it looks like the front end of this limo was a lot fuzzier than the rest of what's going on.
Well, it might have to do with the zooming in. Okay, but basically, this is what comes out of the Costella Zapruder film. It's a lot better than anything else that's out there, that's for sure. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Okay, it's playing. Okay. Yeah. The reason.
Don, I think we got your background noise again.
Okay. Okay. Now that's the sequence with the close-up where we have zoomed in on frames 133 to 182, which is right before the limo disappears behind the Simmons freeway sign. Okay. Now we can go on to the next slide here, Chance. 147. Now here on 147. I don't know how you guys see this one, but it seems like it's in the interval between one of the both the blink lights. The next one, 148, the same thing. Yeah, the same thing here. 149. Now 149 was on the left, and then 150. Yeah, go back to 149. Right. Okay. You see the difference there? Now 151. Next. Okay. 52. 53. Here's where the glare of the sun starts to hit the grill, and it makes it a little bit difficult here. 54. Now, here's a really good example that shows that none of the lights are on, okay? And we get a couple of frames here, 155, 154, I believe, and 155. Yeah, see? None of the blink lights are visible here at all. None of them, period. And we should have seen more of this in the Zapruder film, but we don't. Okay, so that in itself shows that there's something very funny going on here. Go ahead. It's 156, right? Here it seems to be on the left. 159, right? 160. 62. 65. Left. 66. 68. We're almost done here. That's 170. Okay. Now this just gives a sample here of how these blink lights, are totally inconsistent here. If you when you compare those blink lights to the much more in the Hughes film, there's just no rhythm here at all whatsoever. Now I just want to real quickly go through a couple of frames here. The next slide, 131. Right, 131 and 132. These two frames, now, don't forget that we just, at the beginning of the show, we established that there's supposed to be 0.0564 difference between frames as far as time, seconds, okay? Now, within that time frame, any movement, any visible movement that you see of people it's going to be pretty obvious that frames have been removed because it's physically impossible to move that fast. Okay, now if you look at these two frames, just if you focus on any group of people or any one person in this scene here, you'll see that they're moving. They're not static. They're not in the same position. And I wanted to focus on the man with the hard hat here, because this is a very good example. Now, it just doesn't have to be just him. Just look at any of the other people, between these two frames. And again, 132 is blurred in comparison to 131, all right, which we mentioned earlier. Now, if you go on to the next slide, number 52, okay, now just look between when we zoom in on the hard hat man, based on 18.3 frames per second, he's moved his head about 90 degrees left in only 0.054 seconds. Now, if this were based on 24 frames per second, he would have moved in even less time, 0.041 seconds. Now, this is something that is extremely important, because we're seeing, within 2 frames, that there is a lot of movement, much more movement than is physically possible, for any human being. Okay, you can now, if you can run that MP4 here, hard hat MP4, and I have a little MP4 here that with an overlay that shows exactly what I'm talking about. Are you there, Chance? Hard hat man. Yep. Okay. It'll play a couple of times. Okay, so now we're let me get okay now the last slide that I wanted to show is Charles Brem and his son Joe. Okay, now the frame that we're referring to is frame 280 and 283. This is another Roy Shaffier discovery here. Okay, frames 280 and 283. If you look closely at these 2 frames, you'll see that it's physically impossible for Joey Brem to come out from behind his father in only 3 frames. We're talking about, like I said, 0.054 frames, seconds per frame. Okay, that is extremely fast. It's totally impossible for that kid to have moved, from being behind his father to being beside him. Okay, and not only that, you can see the rhythm of Charles Brem's clapping. It's totally out of sync. All right, and so this is another example that, and I have many. Okay, and I'm going to show one last one here, and it has to do with Malcolm Summers. Okay, and Malcolm Summers is the gentleman that we see in much later in frames 240 something, where he's diving to his right. Okay, but the speed with which he does this in only 11 frames is just astounding. The man totally dives to his right, and then he hops back into a squatting position in 11 frames, which again is totally impossible. Can you play that clip there, Malcolm Summers? Okay, it's going to play a couple of times here, so. Okay, so that basically is what I wanted to show our audience tonight, and I didn't want to go on to the portion of the Zapruder film going past the Stemmons freeway sign, because it's just that portion we believe has been reshot with an optical printer, with the background being totally out of sync in the size of the people in the background with the people in the limo. And one thing about that Malcolm Summers clip, it also coincides with the time that we believe the motorcycle cops were Cheney and Hargis and Jackson did all those actions that they spoke about in our series of the JFK Horsemen, and it shows that that's a very, very possible smoking gun, where those films were also extricated, which show the actions of Hargis running, for example, running in front of the Queen Mary on his way up to the grassy knoll, and the Secret Service men dismounting and running past the limo with their guns drawn. So that's a very high possibility that could have been one of the areas where that was removed from the film.
Now, in relation to your hard hat example, Noel Twyman, already in Bloody Treason, 1997, established that William Greer is looking back at JFK and then turns forward too fast to be humanly possible. Actually, he hired a tennis player to determine how fast he could turn his head, and discovered that Greer turns his head twice as fast as is humanly possible, which doesn't sound like much initially until you realize that turns a 4-minute mile into a 2-minute mile. You're talking about something that no person could do, and therefore represents, again, a whole lot of excision of frames.
That's right. And also, I believe it was Jack White who discovered that flatbed or pickup truck there in the background, which from I believe a Cancellaire photograph shows that the pickup truck has people inside or material, but in the Zapruder film, it's been totally flattened out where there's nothing back there. Okay, so that those are just examples of tampering that we know are provable with the Zapruder film.
Don, I know you want to get in on this.
Yeah, I was going to say with Greer, with the head movement back and forth so quick, that's where a lot of this business where people think, oh, Greer shot Kennedy. That's where all that crap comes from, is because it looks like Greer is up to something the way his head is going back and forth, but it's
much more elaborate than that, Don. It's because it looks as though he's turned and has a revolver in his left hand.
Yes.
It appears to be a reflection off of the head of Killerman, but William Cooper, using a very blurry version, advanced that hypothesis, and in Cooper's film, because it's so blurry, you can't tell the difference. The point I'd make is that if Greer had shot Jack, since Greer was to his left front, his brains would have been blown out to the right rear. Instead, they're blown out to the left rear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no other evidence, and really, it's really like what the path Larry is going down is undoubtedly correct, where frames have been removed from the film, and that's why Greer's movements are so otherworldly.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
No, and also,
Larry, have you reflected on how many frames you suspect this your method has revealed to have been removed? And do you believe that it does substantiate the hypothesis that the film was actually shot at 24 frames per second, not 18.3?
Oh yeah, it does, and it confirms that many frames have been removed. And Douglas Horn has also mentioned that the abrupt movement of JFK was augmented because of the extrication of the frames around Zapruder 313.
Right. I talk about that extensively many places, where after the limo stopped, he was hit twice in the back of the head from the Dow taxi, slumped forward. Jackie eased him back up, was looking him right in the face when he was hit in the right temple by that frangible or exploding bullet fired from the intersection of the triple underpass and the picket fence, and he slumped to the left. So that it was only when they merged the two together that the only residue you had was from 312 to 313, and then the jerky left into the rear is because they excised so many other frames.
Yes, and I also wanted to mention that the first researcher to advance the notion of Greer shooting JFK was actually Fred Newcomb, and Roy also did research on that. And but it's like you said, Jim. The debris would have gone in the direction of Cheney, and even though Cheney was sprayed, but he wasn't hit in the same manner that Hargis was. And,
right.
So that's a big difference there.
Right. I mean,
it's very strange, Will. I was just going to say it's very strange because Will Will Cooper seemed to have done a lot of good work, but then all of a sudden he just, out of the blues, started to push the limo driver doing it. So
Look, I know perfectly good people today who still believe that Greer shot JFK.
Yeah, I think it's because of these missing frames that's why it's getting traction with the public. Is they're kind of confused by what's going on there, I think.
Yeah, well, what happens after the Stemmons freeway sign is a totally different ball game. You have to divide this. Yeah,
it's completely retimed the film. Yeah,
you have to divide this from before and after the Stemmons freeway sign. That's my take on this. Okay, because after the Stemmons freeway sign, for example, and this is something that we've been working on continuously now, is that frame 255 should have shown Officer Cheney as he is shown in the Auction 6 photograph. Okay, he's within arm's distance. He can touch JFK, and he's in a position where he is above the door line of the limo, and he should be visible in the Zapruder film in several frames. However, he is not. All right, and this is something that. For example, this is the reason why this past November in Dallas, I went and recreated the Zapruder film from the same pedestal, and I realized that even cars, as they were passing by side, sort of generally in the same perspective, and orientation, that the limo and Officer Cheney should have been, and those cars are perfectly visible. Okay, so there's
don't you think the way that the limousine recedes beneath the center of the frame of reference suggests it may have been shot from a tripod in the pergola rather than
That's also a possibility.
The Zapruder would have been centering it on the limousine. I mean, he would never have allowed the limousine to almost disappear.
It's a possibility. Well, once that's why it's important to establish that everything that happens post Stemmons freeway sign, that's a totally different ballgame as far as I'm concerned, because that is the most important sequence, and that's where they had to do all their magic there.
Yeah, I think Jim's really onto something there with the tripod business. I don't think the Zapruder film, any of it was shot by Zapruder.
Well, Jack found that image that shows Sitzman, standing in front of him. Okay, from the other side of from Commerce, over from the other side on Commerce. Okay.
Well, what Jack found was a whole multiplicity of inconsistent images that strongly suggest that they were positioning him now retrospectively rather than that he had been an authentic presence.
Yeah. Well, if they were going
they needed someone to whom they would attribute the source of the film.
Right.
They may very well have actually been using the tripod in the center of the pergola.
That's right.
I mean, there's no reason why an actual human being who's following the limousine would ever have let it get so far out of the center of the frame.
That's another point where you see exactly, especially the lower part where
exactly.
it disappears all completely, very conveniently, I might say. Okay, so
it's ridiculous to think a human being who's filming the president of the United States would allow that to happen to get him out of the center of the frame.
Right. And we've spoken, many times about the motorcycle policemen and their non-reactions to gunfire, because they mentioned many times in testimony where they said that they looked around over both their shoulders, but you look at the Zapruder film and they're not looking anywhere. They're looking straight ahead. In fact, maybe over towards the president, but they're never looking over their shoulders in response to gunfire because they couldn't hear any gunfire. So, with the motorcycle, the sound of the motorcycle.
If we go back to your frame Z131, chances, the fourth from the end, if you could go back to that momentarily.
Yeah. That's a classic right there, because when you compare one to the other, I mean, it's pretty obvious that stuff has been removed between one and the other,
Well, what many commentators have noticed is that even when the president's here, this row of bystanders does not cheer and wave the way everyone else does everywhere else on the motorcade. leading to the inference that they replaced the foreground. And as you observe, it was using these sophisticated techniques of optical printing and special effects with footage that had been shot when the pilot car passed, and the people weren't animated because it was only the pilot car, not Jack and Jackie, but there was something there going on in the foreground they needed to conceal. So they used the footage that had been shot earlier to create a new foreground here of these relatively motionless spectators.
Yeah. And the crescendo of the noise was from what witnesses have stated, that it was very obvious that once the actual motorcade, the actual limo, started to come down Houston and turn on Elm Street, it was very loud, and with the sirens and everything, and the people clapping and yelling and screaming, so. And
of course, the idea that the presidential limousine would be out first and the motorcade is a manifest absurdity. It should have been in the middle. This is one of more than 15 indications we have of Secret Service complicity in setting him up for the hit. It was going to be too confusing if he was in the middle after the mayor, after the vice president, after the flatbed truck carrying the reporters and their camera crews to cover this important event. So they simply obviated all the standard procedures and put him out front to make it easier for the snipers to target the victim.
Amazing.
My big question is, if you're the perps, why even release this film to the public, even altering it? What?
Because they never believed the public would accept the story they were going to spin if they didn't have visual proof thereof. Look, what if Jack had been killed in the midnight at the White House? He just wakes up dead. No one in the world would doubt it had been a conspiracy. They had to do it in public in a way that they could control, but that could be used to convince the public that it had been done by, in this case, a lone demented assassin. And for that, they had to control the body. They had to control the film. They had agents at all the film processing centers in Dallas for 2 weeks after the assassination, taking films that were related to Dealey
Nobody saw that movie though until the Clay Shot trial in 1969. I
was going to say that they did not intend.
But that was because it didn't come out as well as they had hoped. But they needed to have it, claim they'd seen it, and then if ever it were necessary to bring it out. And yes, you're right. When it was brought out, the flaws began to be conspicuous. But remember, Dawn, everyone was furious with Dan Razor because he said Jack had slumped forward. Well, Jack had slumped forward. But then Jack eased him back up, and he is shot again, and he slumps to the left. So Rather was savage for not describing the violent back and to the left, which Rather didn't report because Rather never saw it.
He said with considerable violence. Forward.
Yep. Considerable violence. He went forward, yeah.
Yeah, looks like they had a lot of magic to take out, but getting the lights to line up was a physical impossibility.
I think there were considerations that just didn't cross their mind. I actually believe the blink rate is one of those that they never considered. They never thought anyone would notice. And it was part of the genius of Roy Shaffier to realize that there was this internal clock to the timing of events going on there because of the blink rate. So that, Roy, in my opinion, has not been completely successful in articulating his case and in proving it without a lot of flaws and shortcomings. He's had terrific insights about some of these points. And I think you're doing a nice job of vindicating Roy's initial sense about the importance of the blink rate, Larry.
So you don't believe?
And I think there's still a lot.
Go ahead, Larry.
No, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done on this, Jim, because once we have been able to calibrate what the blink rate should be using films that are comparable, because they show the limo coming down within a few yards.
So suppose we just restricted our focus of evidence about the alteration of the film, which is super abundant and so much of which we presented, including the JFK Horseman and all that, to what you presented. It still makes the Jim DiEugenio or the Robert Groden or the Josiah Thompson position that the film is authentic and unaltered ridiculous.
I know.
Ridiculous. Just a small amount of evidence produced here about the blink rate that Roy Shaffier, for God's sake, observed years and years ago, first published in Assassination Science 1998, already refutes the contention that the film is authentic.
Yeah, and Roy has a lot of other points, very interesting points about the authenticity of the film. For example, the dye markings on the side between the sprocket holes, which are totally inconsistent with what is seen today in the film, and that is those are points that somebody that has had a lot of experience handling this type of material, because don't forget that 8mm is archaic. We don't even see that anymore. We don't even know what it looks like anymore. And somebody like Roy Shaffier, who has the experience and who's handled that, those type of people, are not going to be around, that much longer.
That's right. Roy had professional training in processing and dealing with films and photographs like these we're discussing here today. You're absolutely right.
That's right. And pretty soon, we're not even going to have, somebody who can come out and say, hey, this film should have been like this or like that, and however, it is not, and that's my point about how important Roy Shaffer's contributions have been.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. Black Op Radio said last week that they're going to be looking at possible ZFilm alteration in the future.
Gee, you're kidding me. In 2016, they announced they're going to be looking at it in the future?
Yes.
This is ludicrous. This is ridiculous. This makes them look like blooming idiots.
Well, now that I think back on it, I do recall reading in the Warren report where they did call the Zapruder film the time clock of the assassination.
Right, absolutely.
Good point.
Yeah, maybe that was the original intent was, hey, we can we'll use this as our version of the assassination.
Well, look, Don, you go through the Warren Commission and they cite the specific frames, they cite the specific timing, the angles, it's all there in the Warren report. They needed it to build their case for a 3-shot scenario.
Well, first of all,
Warren Thompson, may I remind you, has said that the Zapruder film is the closest thing we have to the absolute truth about the assassination of JFK.
Whoops.
Well, the frames that the Warren Commission published, let's not forget, were all black and white, all blurry, all
out of order.
Crap, in comparison, Life magazine was the first publication to start publishing some of the frames. Only some of the frames, 31
yes.
In the November 29th issue, 1963. But once they had cleaned it all up, and then let's not forget that when it was first published, Hoover even admitted that frames 313 and 314 had been reversed. Okay, to make
David Lifton had his girlfriend write to Hoover and was just dumbfounded when he wrote back and confirmed that indeed in the Warren Commission supporting volumes they had been.
So, all of these interesting tidbits about the Zapruder film, that it's never going to go out of style, for researchers to be arguing about it. But I think that now that the blink rate, is something that really needs to be researched further. And especially now that we can calibrate the blink rate with those two films.
I think those who are interested in this aspect should go back to Assassination Science and read the chapter by Roy Shaffier and Mike Pincher. It's very interesting to see this pioneering work that you're refining here using a better quality version of the film provided by Costella, to which I refer as the Costella combined cut, because he's restored the missing frames, he's removed aspect ratio and pincushion distortion, and the clarity of the film. It's by far the best available. Even the MPI, which is largely regarded as the gold standard, is grossly inferior. It has many frames in the wrong order. It has frames that are missing. The Costella film is decidedly the place to go, and you can find it at assassinationscience.com. Just scroll down to the new Zapruder film, meaning the new rendering of the film by removing pincushion and aspect ratio distortion, restoring the missing frames and all that. It's really a brilliant piece of work. I'm so glad to see you're taking advantage of it, Larry.
And Jim, and don't forget, no copyright restrictions. I think that's the most important.
That's right. This is not a version of the film over which the Sixth Floor Museum exercises any control at all.
Yeah,
this is a very good thing.
I don't know if y'all been checking with Robert on. Y'all been checking with Robert Groden on all this stuff.
Well, don't forget, Gary, that the first thing that he said on Friday night at Judy Berry Baker's conference this past November were two things: that the Zapruder film was authentic, and that the man in the door was Billy Lovelady.
The first speaker, the first thing, 10 minutes apiece. And
you see, I do not understand how Judith Baker, who knows better, can continue to be supportive of Robert Groden, because he's been undermining her at every step, even with the HSCA. He was telling them on the basis of an argument that Judith has refuted that the man in the doorway was Billy Lovelady, when in fact it was Lee Oswald, and where Judith cemented Lee in the doorway with her study that completely reversed the claims made by Robert Groden. How she could continue to tolerate his presence is simply beyond me.
So what do we do about that?
No, it's going to change. It's going to change. Trust me. It's going to change, Jim. It's not going to be like that next year.
Robert Groden is kind of the Richard Gage of JFK.
Yeah. Well, looks like we just got a couple of minutes left. Y'all want to?
No, we don't have a couple of minutes, Gary. We have less than that. Everyone, you want to invite everyone to give their parting words.
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry.
No, I'm done. You guys go ahead.
Don.
Yeah. I just want to say we've got more, more stuff on the way coming up in future shows about Israeli nukes and JFK.
I've got some more work coming up in the future about. I've really been having a lot of requests of people wanting to know, what does it mean today? The results of the assassination. How do we look at today as a result of that? And I've got some new work on that. And Dr. Fetcher, close us out.
Oh, Gary, I think that's a terrific idea. Yes. What happened to JFK and why it matters today was a 2+ hour presentation I gave at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2011. Everyone can find it there online today. That might be a good place to start. I'm glad we're going to return to that theme. Gary, close us out.
All right. Chance George in the engineer's chair. Once again, we thank you very much. This is JFK show number 89. And Don, please be on the lookout for this new ZFilm alteration over there at Black Op Radio, okay? Give us a heads up whenever they're talking about it. We'll see you next week.